If you've been watching Family Guy for a while, you may have noticed that this Peter...
I am not gonna let my family live on the street. Not even if it means ending up like Seamus here.
And this Peter...
I just hate being around the kids. What?
feel like two different characters. After being on the air for 25 years, changes are bound to happen with characters, but Family Guy is perhaps one of the strongest examples of Flanderization. Would you look at that, another thing Family Guy took from The Simpsons.
Intellectual theft! What do you have to say about that, Griffin? Go!
Flanderization is essentially the process of a character coming to be defined by certain traits that are massively oversimplified. Take the titular example, Ned Flanders. Originally, he was just a well-to-do neighbor who held strong Christian values, but would later go on to become a caricature of evangelicals. Similar changes have happened to nearly everyone in the main cast of Family Guy, so let's take a look and see how they've changed for the better, or if you ask Reddit, the worst. Starting with Cleveland Brown, whose evolution is quite an interesting one, considering that he's the only side character to get injected with a little bit of main character syndrome.
Hey, y'all! It's the Cleveland Show!
So Cleveland's first few appearances in the show's earlier seasons saw him as a well-mannered, quiet family man with a distinctly slow drawl.
I promised Loretta I was gonna trim the hedges and be tender with her.
Now who wouldn't hear that and think that this guy needs 5 seasons of a spin-off show? Truthfully, Cleveland's role in the show was fairly limited, though sometimes he would be used as the bestower of good advice. Which, in this show, is just stating the obvious to idiots.
Peter, not every Jewish person is good with money.
But Cleveland's laid-back attitude would eventually morph into him being seen as a pushover, which culminated in the significant episode The Cleveland Loretta Quagmire, as he simply accepted defeat when his wife cheated on him.
Cleveland Brown, you are pathetic.
I disagree, but I respect your candor.
However, in that same episode, Cleveland would also finally find a fire inside of him that would finally wake him up for a change. Yeah, wanting to kill one of your closest friends will do that to you.
Glenn Quagmire, you're dead!
From there, Cleveland wasn't used super prominently, but there were signs of his character livening up and gaining more personality, whether it be through playing R2-D2,
You can kiss the lower part of the back of the canister that is my body.
or getting a little bit of his mojo back.
Carolyn? Cleveland?
Oh, hey, Brian. Close that window. You're letting all the stank out.
Obviously, someone saw something in this guy. And by the end of Season 7, Cleveland was out of Quahog and starring in his very own show.
What the hell? He's getting his own show?
So now that he's got a whole show named after him, Cleveland is going to need a little more depth. Enter the Tubbs family, who Cleveland would have to learn to get along with after marrying his high school crush, Donna.
How's that job hunt coming?
Why don't you shut the hell up?
Cleveland would have to juggle the pathways to being a father once again, which in turn added a bit more nuance and emotion to the character. Comparatively, Cleveland was a lot more mature than Peter, so episodes would usually focus on his other flaws instead of his stupidity, like his concern over his son, feeling inadequate next to his wife's ex-husband, or facing the president in a game of one-on-one hoops. We've all got to deal with those things at least once in our lives.
Wow, Cleveland, I figured it was gonna be all black guys, but this is great.
Missed ya.
But once Family Guy reached the end of Season 12, the Cleveland show had ended, and Cleveland was brought back as a permanent member of the cast. Something that didn't come without a little heckling.
The Talking Bear was so bad, Seth MacFarlane quit voicing him after Season 2.
And from there, Cleveland slipped back into supporting character territory, never really reaching the same heights he once hit, despite being the focal point of a few episodes.
You're absolutely right.
Cleveland did seem to bring back some of the personality he found in Stool Bend, but with no central narratives to really let them be seen, Cleveland is kinda just taking a seat in the background as Peter's friend. The only worthwhile change to come to the character was Arif Zahir taking over voice role duties for the character starting in Season 20.
This is terrible. I have such a hard time saying goodbye.
It's weird to think that this guy was running his own show for a few years. The silver lining is that he's proof that you can go from flat character based on your race to headliner at a moment's notice. That means we're only a few petitions away from getting a Mr. Washi Washi series. Who's with me? And oh man, where to even begin with Joe Swanson? The character change kinda goes beyond Flanderization and instead feels like he was given a whole new personality. Joe's one of those characters who feels completely different nowadays from when he was first introduced all the way back in Season 1.
Technically, he was killed by the state, but funny story, he did curse my name just before the injection.
So when Joe was first introduced, he was portrayed as a strong, able-bodied paraplegic who exuded bravery and captured the hearts of his neighbors with his tales of heroics.
Reach for the sky, dirtbag! Alright, pal, you stolen your last Christmas.
Being handicapped was always a part of his identity, but he never let that stop him from facing the world head-on, whether it be taking down criminals or even making jokes at his own expense.
Oh no! Oh no! I've broken my legs!
But it soon became clear that there must be some frustrations with his predicament, as Joe is later shown to have some anger issues. A temper and a government-issued gun. What a combo!
This is in poor taste, Peter. You're starting to f*** me up.
All you gotta do
You're
is hit.
starting to f*** me up!
The biggest thing about Joe is that he's always capable despite being in the chair, but the show still found ways to delve into his insecurities in a way that was never really demeaning to the character.
The other day was the first time I've ever lost a perp. It was also the first time I've ever really felt handicapped.
Believe it or not, Family Guy was once able to handle disabilities with grace. I know, I'm just as surprised as you are. But as time went on, being handicapped continued to grow into more and more of a punchline, and this shift in approach severely affected how Joe was portrayed in the show.
Not being able to pay my child's hospital bill somehow makes me feel like less of a man.
In later seasons, emphasis on Joe's condition began to grow heavier and heavier, especially when it came to his wife Bonnie. Initially, Bonnie was shown to be a loving and caring wife who managed to support Joe where he needed it, but this would soon change as she began to grow tired of the life she was living.
Do you have any idea how hard it is living with you?
And yet, somehow, they may be the happiest couple on Spooner Street. But Bonnie's shift from loving her husband to seemingly wanting him dead in many cases is definitely startling and makes a ton of sense why Joe's now portrayed the way he is.
I'll take it.
Later in the series, Joe's viewed as having a lot less dignity than he had in the first portion of the series. Heck, they even retconned his heroic origin story and replaced it with him botching a sting operation. Can't the man have anything? And the pity parade just kept on marching along for old Joe, with the character often being showcased as depressive and even unstable at times. Episodes like Jolo and Brokeback Swanson are prime examples of this, reducing a once level-headed man to a shell of what he once was.
Goodbye, fellas!
That's our lovable, rambunctious Joe. And from then on, Joe is more or less turned into a schlub who's consistently the butt of the joke in the friend group. Also, for whatever weird reason, the writers have Joe making lame political jokes in multiple episodes now. Brian, he's coming for your gimmick.
You know what DC stands for? Dumb Congress.
It's kinda wild just how far down the totem pole Joe's fallen. What was once a capable man overcoming life has now been reduced to a punching bag on wheels. I guess when dunking on the Cleveland show got old, they had to move on to a new target. You're safe for now, Cleveland. Now if only they'd let you talk more. And as for Glenn Quagmire, his change of character as of late is a bit confusing. He's somewhat lost his edge, even though the show really hasn't.
What's all the noise, boys? I was just getting out of a sound sleep.
So when Quagmire began to find his character beyond just being one of Peter's buddies, he was portrayed as quite the ladies' man. He loves the ladies, but that doesn't necessarily mean the ladies love him.
Capricorn. Oh. Well, I know you're not a Virgo.
So for a while, he was kinda just shown as a somewhat suave bachelor, always on the hunt for some tail. But it didn't take long for him to transform from a metaphorical predator to a literal one.
Dear Diary. Jackpot.
There's nothing wrong with a dirty character, but there are certain kinds of dirt it's probably best not to roll around in. So while he was evolving into the guru of the female body that we know and love, the writers were also taking things exceptionally far with him, from being a peeping Tom...
Would you just sit down and go to the bathroom already?
to more or less scarring a bunch of teenage girls for life.
How old are you? 16. 18? You're first. Mom! I like where this is going.
So for a while, Quagmire was mostly used as a one-dimensional punchline, which, to the show's credit, did make him one of the show's most iconic characters. Like the rest of the show, he pushed boundaries for what was acceptable on TV, even if most considered his actions unacceptable.
Thank God you know CPR! What the hell's CPR?
But you can't just stay a one-note joke your whole life, unless your name is Buzz Killington. So when Season 5 came around, the show decided to flesh out Quagmire more by giving him a job as a pilot.
The flight's gonna be a little longer than we've expected. We've got some very strong headwinds, giggity.
This would seemingly lead to a minor yet noticeable change in Quagmire's character, as he would often be viewed as one of the more mature members of Peter's friend group, though this wouldn't be fully expanded upon further until later in the show. But despite this, Quagmire's view towards women was still seen as predatory, and sometimes didn't elicit the laughs the writers may have been expecting.
You're a sick man! Hey, keep it down. I don't want my neighbors seeing a fat old dirty screaming at me on my front lawn.
But it's okay, he's got a funny catchphrase, so everything is alright. But as we get to know Quagmire more, we learn he tends to be a bit of a cynic with strong opinions. Obviously, this is best shown through his feelings on Brian later down the line.
You're just a big, sad, alcoholic bore.
His rivalry with Brian has become one of his more defining impacts on the show for the past decade, but if we look deeper, this change in attitude goes beyond even Brian. In many episodes, Quagmire is seen to have little patience for stupidity, often lashing out at even the people he's supposed to like.
Peter, I'm gonna punch you with this beer mug till I'm holding just the handle.
You know, for a guy who's all about releasing, he sure